Hi, welcome to our free webinar for this month. Excel Pro Tips, how to clean up and gather data like a pro. So my name is Courtney Vance. I'm a senior project manager and Excel wizard and data nerd. I am a professional that uses Excel on a daily basis. Now, a little known fact, or maybe this might be common knowledge, I actually got my start in the industry as a marketing coordinator. My educational background is in essentially business writing. I do not have a mathematics background. I just have a strong desire to not have to waste my life away going line by line, copy and pasting. And I think that's something we can all relate to. So I'm sharing this just to let you know that even if you feel like you'll never understand Excel, it's too hard, it really isn't. Anything is possible. And I hope that you walk away today with some Excel tips that'll help you be more efficient in gathering and correcting and maintaining your marketing data. Oh, and also, you'll notice on the bottom of the screen, there is a QR code for LinkedIn. If you would like to follow or be friends on LinkedIn, please go ahead and scan the QR code and let's connect. So with that, let's go ahead and review some general tips to keep in mind when you're working with data. So the very first question you should ask yourself before you embark on a major spreadsheet project is, do you even really need to do it? Sometimes it's actually faster, more efficient to import and this relates specifically to if you have a CRM. Sometimes it's faster just to manually enter the data by hand into your CRM as opposed to prep it and use all kinds of crazy formulas to get it ready for import. So how do you know? How do you know which is more efficient? So the standard that we use internally at Security Consulting is, are there more than 100 records? Yes. Okay. Then definitely importing is going to be more time efficient. If it's less than 100, I mean, depending on how close to 100 it is, it might be a coin toss, but typically, if it's less than 100, it is faster and more efficient to just do it by hand. Additionally, if you are creating a spreadsheet, maybe it's that time of year for you to start thinking about holiday cards, and you have to send out a contact list to your entire firm or, your account directors, et cetera. You're going to want to include some clear directions on what you want those participants to contribute to your spreadsheet. Clear instructions just helps people not feel frustrated, because imagine if you're not great at spreadsheets and somebody sends you a spreadsheet and you're like, oh, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. So including a tab in your spreadsheet, maybe making it yellow and saying instructions, and also maybe communicating in some other channels about what's expected and how you want people to contribute, who to go to for questions. Those are great ideas to include in this process. Additionally, if you're working with other users, you're going to want to think of ways that you can influence consistency with certain structures. One idea we are definitely going to cover in one of the later slides. But what I mean by this is, like, how are you going to encourage people to respond consistently, instead of abbreviations or, because they could be all over the place, right? Respond with the spelled out word or what have you, whatever the case may be. You want somebody to respond consistently because it helps you not have to clean up their response data after you receive it back. Additionally, you want to think of ways that you can implement accountability and documentation measures for yourself. If you were importing, you might want to import to a field that says data updated as part of XYZ data project on today's date. It could go to a notes field. In doing so, it allows you to run a report just on the fields or just on the projects or personnel that you updated. You don't have to run a report on every single thing because you might not be updating every single thing, right? Additionally, you can, if you're doing things by hand in your CRM, you can attach your document, maybe have a project data collection sheet that you send to your project managers to collect information. And you're manually adding those in. I recommend you attach that document to your project record or, whatever the case may be, so that you can show this is what I received, this is what was entered on this date. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, I don't have a CRM. This still pertains to you as well. If you were working solely within a spreadsheet or some other format, all you have to do is just include an area for notes and say approved and completed on whatever the date is, or however you want to track it. But just be sure that you leave yourself breadcrumbs, because in 6 months, I guarantee you, you are not going to remember anything that you imported. It's going to throw you for a loop. So if you leave yourself clues on how to report on it, how to show, the status of how things were handled, it'll make your life so much easier in the end. And you always want to back up your data before you change anything, and then keep your data that you imported as well. It's very important. Just assume Murphy's Law is always in effect, especially if you're new to working with spreadsheets. And Murphy's Law is anything that can go wrong will, because it most certainly will, let me tell you. Even the most competent of Excel users will accidentally make a huge mistake. But as long as you have your backup data and you have your import data, it's all good, because you always have something to go back to and you can always see what was imported. So maybe the error happened after the import, somebody changed it in your CRM. So, you can determine, oh, it wasn't me, it was somebody else. Or it was me, oops, my bad. And that's okay. I have the original data, we can fix it, no problem. So those are just some things to keep in mind. So with that, we are going to move into the actual features and formulas of Excel that I use all the time. That'll be a big help. So the first one is data validation. So have you ever received a spreadsheet where you click into the cell and this cool little pop-out jumps out at you? It's like, oh, there's a list. You can just click on things. This is called data validation. And it's a lot simpler to do than it might seem. It is an out-of-the-box feature in Excel, and it is perfect for like creating those structures of consistency so that everybody has to respond the same in that column. And a great use for it would be your holiday card updates. So this is a real example from one of our clients. It was actually part of their holiday and other contact list updates that they do annually. And in that list, we have these options. So just something to consider if you are ramping up for your holiday cards, because I know it is getting closer to that time of year if it is not already. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, is you can only have one choice. You can't select, it's not a checkbox, right? You can't check a bunch of boxes. You can only have one thing. There is a way to do it, but you have to know how to code with VBA, and it is a little complicated. So for the sake of this webinar, you can only have one selection here. And when you build it out, it is going to be a comma separated list. So let's look more detailed at those settings. So where do you find this setting? So it's going to be on your data tab, and it's going to look like the indicated icon here. So you see it, boop, right there. So what you're going to do is you're going to click the drop down, and then you're going to go to data validation. And then you'll get a pop-up window that looks similar to this. So you're only going to change two areas. The first one is here, you're going to change it to list. And then down here, you have a choice to make. So you can either do comma separated values, which I recommend, especially if you are new to working with these Excel features, or you can reference a list in different cells in your spreadsheet. So if you go with a comma separated list, comma no spaces, and you have to, if you want them alphabetized, you have to alphabetize them. It will not do it after the fact. Just a little bit of annoying. It's not really a big deal. So if you do put them in the order that is not optimal, you can always edit it at any point and it'll be fine. So another feature that you may or may not know about is conditional formatting. So this is located on the Home tab, and you may have worked with it before. A lot of times people use it to find the duplicates. But there are also some more advanced features in conditional formatting that are super, super helpful. I recommend using it at minimum to find your duplicates, but if you navigate to your Home tab, what you do is you can go to Highlight Small Rules, and then navigate over to More Rules. And then when you do, you should get a pop-up that looks like this if you're on a PC. I'm going to show you the Mac version next, but this is what it looks like for a PC. So over here are the different options that are in this first drop-down box here. So if you were looking for a specific word or phrase, you would want to use specific text. So you would select specific text, and then you would type your text here. So a common reason to use this would be a repeat offender likes to bypass the CRM requirements of needing an email address by putting fake@email.com. You know, God bless them for being consistent because that makes it a little bit easier. So you could put fake@email.com in this text, and anywhere that it finds it, it will highlight it. But on a PC, it does not automatically highlight it. You actually have to go in, or I should say, it does not automatically colorize. You have to go in and pick the color that you want. And you can see down here, it says no format set. So you would just need to go to the format and then navigate over to where they have the colors and then, for your fills and then change the color. So I tend to use specific text and blanks the most, but there are these other options as well. So now if you are on a Mac, it looks almost the same, maybe a little prettier. But it's the same process. You change it to specific text, you put your text here. The difference is on a Mac, by default, it will colorize it to red. Now, if you don't like red, maybe you want some other color combination, you can pick from this drop-down menu. They do have some presets, like your typical, red, yellow, green, or you can do a custom color as well. Okay. So now we're getting into the functions or formulas, however you want to call them. These are my top 5 that I tend to use every single time I am doing data work in a spreadsheet. The first one is clean trim, and it's basically a cleanup formula. It's most useful for making data consistent. XLOOKUP is a cross-reference formula. You would use this if you're trying to look up data in another spreadsheet and bring it over, so you don't have to copy paste line by line. It is very helpful. Now, XLOOKUP, if you've never heard of it before, and you've heard of index match, they function very similarly, but I personally, as somebody who used to use index match all the time last year, as soon as I discovered XLOOKUP, I was like, mind blown. It's so much easier. So I recommend XLOOKUP over index match any day. If formula is something that you can use as to check your work or to check, if an import came over correctly. We'll look more into that later, but basically, if you have 2 columns of data and you want to say if column A equals column B, then it's good. If it doesn't match, then I need to know. So give me some kind of keyword to tell me, hey, you need to look at this because it doesn't look right. And then the last 2, concat or concatenate and text join, are essentially the same, function-wise. They are both used to join data together. But, depending on the circumstance, one might work better than the other. Let's dive right in. So as mentioned before, clean trim is a cleanup formula, which you might be able to infer from the name. And if you look here above the table, this is the actual formula. So clean is removing hidden characters, and trim is removing additional spaces. It is actually 2 formulas nested inside each other like a Russian nesting doll. When you combine them, it takes a lot of the effort of cleaning out those hidden characters and spaces off of you instantly. And you would use this because it makes your data between two different data sets consistent. So let's say you have the scenario of you have a project sheet from accounting, I should say an export that includes project data, and it has the project number. And then you, from your CRM system, you have your existing data with a project number. But maybe from your CRM, it has an extra space on the end of your project number. So in Excel's eyes, even though the numbers are the same, they're not the same. They're different because one has a space and one does not have a space. So if you're trying to cross-reference with XLOOKUP, it's not going to be able to find it because they're different. So what you need to do is you need to clean up your data first. So in this example, you can see that there is a space here and there's a bunch of spaces here. So with trim clean, you can type in this very first B1 cell, =, clean, parentheses, trim, parentheses, A1. So you would just click on A1 and then you would close it and hit enter. And then it would automatically, push you down to the next cell. And then you would see something like this. The car was red with the appropriate amount of spaces. So then you can either copy paste down to have the same effect, because if you copy paste, it will copy the formulas down for you in the correct order. And then, it'll update all of your data at once. Now, an important note is when you're working with formulas, after you have cleaned them up or cross-referenced them, you're going to want to paste them over themselves or paste them over somewhere else and just paste the values, because formulas are kind of like a little bit of live coding. So if you do not paste it with just the values, and I think on PC it looks like a clipboard with numbers, then if you click off somewhere or you move stuff around, your formula is going to break. So you want to ensure that you flatten out the formulas and just keep the data that it's returned once you're done using the formula format. Okay, so let's look at the XLOOKUP function. So as mentioned before, maybe in the scenario you have an export from your accounting program with a project number and various project details, and then you need to bring some of those accounting details over to your CRM data for import, and you're going to use the project number to match it. That's very important. That is called a unique key. You need to have a unique key to do XLOOKUP. Otherwise, it won't reliably work. But essentially, this is how XLOOKUP works. If you type into a cell XLOOKUP, the first thing it asks you is, what is the lookup value? This would be your project number. So since you want to bring accounting data into your CRM data in your spreadsheet, starting at your CRM data spreadsheet in an empty column, you would say =, XLOOKUP, and you would click the very first project number. That would be your lookup value. Then you would do a comma without any spaces, because it's not actually a sentence in Excel. It is a programming language. So you would just do a comma, no space. And then the next question is, where do you want me to look up this project number? Where am I looking? What is the lookup array? So you're looking up the CRM project number in the whole column of the accounting project numbers. So basically, when you get to the step, you're just going to highlight the whole column for the accounting version of the project numbers. Still with me? So after you do that, you're going to hit comma. And then the next prompt is, what is the return array? So it's okay. And Excel's thinking, all right, I'm looking up project number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm looking in the column for the accounting data for the project numbers. So what is next to it that you want me to give you back? That is what return array is. And so maybe I want it to give me staff team hours. So I would highlight the column with staff team hours as the whole column as the return array. So if it finds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the accounting data, it will return the corresponding staff team hours. and then I will hit comma. Now, the reason these are in green here is intentional because these are optional. At this point, you could honestly skip this and just close it and be done. But I recommend you use the first two. So the first one is if not found. So this is defining the behavior for what Excel will do if it does not find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 project number. And in this case, I would recommend you type in double quotes, no space. So quotation marks in an Excel formula is basically just defining whatever is in between them as text because it's an equation essentially. And if Excel can't understand it as a number, it will not work. But if you put two double quotes and there's nothing in between, it's basically telling Excel, oh, just return nothing, return a blank. So that is my recommendation there. And then the second one is match mode. I recommend that you use 0 exact match because 90% of the time, approximate matches are absolute garbage. Just avoid them. If you've ever used ChatGPT and you've gotten some really wild returns, it's a lot like that. Approximate matches are just Excel guessing, and it tends to guess incorrectly. Now, there are some situations, usually I'm going to admit out of desperation, where you might say, okay, I have gone as far as I can with an exact match. I need an approximate match. An example of this would be, we actually supported a data project where we were trying to match data. One spreadsheet had a shortened name, maybe McKinney, and then the other one was City of McKinney. And, if we did some of the other options, there are next largest, next smallest. So using one of those, we were actually able to match most of the outstanding records based on, what was the next smallest or the next largest. We still had to review it because, like I said, there are some Excel hallucinations where it's not going to give you what you think you're going to get. And search mode, I actually tend to skip this one myself most of the time, but just understand by default, Excel searches top to bottom. It could also go bottom to top if you adjust the search mode. And where that becomes important is actually in the example of staff team hours. So if you have a team of people that worked on a project, there's going to be multiple people associated to one project number. So let's just say Bob and Jane and Mark worked on the same project. By default, XLOOKUP is going to return the first value that it finds. And if it's in alphabetical order, the first value is going to be Bob. So even if you have 3 rows for Bob, Jane, and Mark, it's going to return Bob's hours for each of them because it's only going to return one value and it's going to return the first one that it finds. Now, there are ways around this logical problem, but it is just something to keep in mind, when you're using this formula. It is better when it is a one-to-one match where one row returns one value, and you don't have multiple rows for the same, project number, for example. Okay, so moving on, if function. So I use the if function as part of a QA/QC process in combination with XLOOKUP. I probably sound like a huge nerd right now, but that's totally cool. So let's say in a scenario, you imported a data set into your CRM. So then you have to check to make sure it all got imported correctly. So you would export the data after it's been updated. And you would use XLOOKUP to return the value that you expected from your import sheet. And then you would use the if formula to say if A equals B, then do nothing, double quotes. And if it doesn't match, I want you to return the text review in double quotes. So here's an example, loosely how that might look. So column A would be what you just recently downloaded from your CRM post import, right? This is what your CRM says. Column B is what you expected it to say from your import. You would have returned this using XLOOKUP. Column C is your if formula. So you would type here =if, and you can see down here, if A1 equals B1, comma, then double quotes, do nothing. If it does not match, double quotes, review. So you can see down here, blue car and orange car are different. And so that is one way that if formula helps you QA/QC. So that way you don't have to do line by line. And then you can just look for all the ones that say review and, investigate. Is it actually incorrect, or was it just, maybe there's an extra space or something. So with that, moving on to the next formula that I use a lot is concat, formerly known as concatenate. And it basically just means to join things together. Concat is perfect for simple joins where you don't have any fields in between that might be blank. So in this example, you are doing the formula for concat is here, A1, comma, add a space, because if you don't insert your double quotes with a space in between, it will just make it one word, and then comma, and then B1, and then you get red car. That is essentially how concat works. Now, maybe you're trying to join text together where sometimes random cells will be blank, like column D here. In that case, text join is a better formula to use. So the very first thing it asks is delimiter. What is your delimiter? And this is essentially what is going in between each bit of text or each bit of data. In this instance, it's going to be a space. So you just do quote, space, quote, comma. That's your delimiter. It could also be punctuation or a letter. It really could be anything that you have on your keyboard that is a character. But we're going to use a space. And then the next one is, it's asking you, what do you want it to do when it finds an empty cell? Ignore empty cells. That way you don't have multiple spaces, or if your delimiter is a comma space, that way you don't have to clean up a bunch of comma space, comma space, comma space, comma space. It will just ignore them and you will just have one instance of it as it should be. And then every single bit of text that you want to join together. And then the end result is shown here. So it's been my pleasure to demo some of the formulas I use as a professional to clean up and gather data efficiently. Because in the near future, we will be offering more in-depth workshops, hands-on, showing details of how the Excel work actually looks as we're going through it together. If that's something of interest to you, we would love to have you and to work through those spreadsheet questions and situations live.